course it's a Telecaster. Now, this was an HSS Tele in that it had a humbucker in the bridge and it had 2 single coils. But what we've gone for in this is a P90 in the casing of a humbucker, so that fit right in beautifully. So P90 is a single coil. And we have, instead of a single coil in the middle here, we have a humbucker, 2 rails, and then in here we have our classic lipstick pickup. Now, that's not all we have in this thing. We have various switches. Now here we have a little switch, and here another switch, and here another switch, and here a 5-way switch. Now, how many tone options can you expect from such a thing as this? Well, first, I want to get into a little bit of background.
Why do we even bother shielding? Well, think of it like this. Interference comes from outside the guitar, and it attacks the guitar, particularly single coil pickups. You'll hear it as like an annoying buzz, that sort of a thing. So the idea with the shielding is we earth it, or ground it, and all these attacking forces in the forms of radio frequency, rogue radio frequencies, RF. Now the idea is that they come in and they have no choice really but to get shunted to ground because they hit all this extra, tinfoil hat basically, and it shunts it to ground. Do I believe in the power of shielding? Sorta, not quite, kinda, maybe, every little bit helps. Originally here we had some shielding paint, if you want to call it, conductive paint. It's a pretty high resistance from, say, here to here, and then we've got shielding paint here, but it wasn't connected to ground through here, so this was kind of its own little thing. So now the way it's set up is we've got very low resistance using this tin foil, basically. It's aluminium tape. Some people like copper, fine, whatever. Now it's a low resistance, and now it's all connected, because this is basically one little swimming pool that's away from these swimming pools, and they're all connected via wire now. They hit a little bit of a snag, nothing we can't fix in this control cavity here. I'm running my finger along, and then if you look there's a raised bit. Now that was all fine in the before time, but in this new enhanced time, what's happening here is we've got a couple of push-pull pots as well as that stock switch going in, and when you put it in like this, it's not going to sit right. It's gonna wobble because that little platform by my thumb is in the way of this push-pull pot. So I'm going to get the router out and take care of that. Look at that, it's not so bad. The interesting thing to note here is, you may not be able to tell from the video, but the bottom floor here is obviously original because the foil is still there. Here's the new wood, and then it actually steps down just a little bit more. If you draw an imaginary line from the bottom of this push-pull to the bottom of that push-pull, and then to the switch, you'll notice that the switch is deeper. So that would account for the little step. That little step is because the switch is slightly deeper. Now that I know I have this section here the same level as that section there, it should all fit nicely back together. Of course, doing this with one hand, it's difficult to tell. Let me try to cram all that stuff in there. Yeah, get on in there. And yeah, that feels like it's gonna work. So that's a lot better than we had it. Fabulous. And here we are with the slightly more nice looking cavity. I've repositioned my sort of star ground for all the internal shielding, and I want to get rid of this stuff on the very top here so I don't cause any ground loops, because I'm adding another wire leading from all this directly to the chassis here, which will also be the main chassis ground coming from the output socket. Hoo-wee! That is the wiring done, and it looks a little complicated, doesn't it? It sort of is. So what does it all do? Well, these labels ought to give you a bit of a clue, but I'm not going to go into that just yet. And I got it all back together again. And one final thing I noticed when I totally slipped my mind. This flips the phase of this pickup. And of course, when you're flipping the phase, you are messing with the polarity. And with these pickups, they automatically, well, I shouldn't say automatically. They come wired so that the outside of the pickup there is hardwired to the black wire, and that's your ground. But the problem is when you're flipping the phase, you're swapping the live and the ground over, and then what happens is live becomes ground, ground becomes live, and that means that the outside of the pickup actually becomes live. So if you touch it, with your fingers when you're playing, you'll hear like zit, 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 whatever. It's kind of not nice. So I lifted the pickup again, and I unsoldered that hard wire, black wire to the chassis, and I did the chassis to the screening here, the tin foil, the shielding. That's the one we want to call it. So now the outside of this lipstick pickup is shielded. I shouldn't say it's... Yeah, well, it is. It's shielded. It's earthed independently of its wires. So that was a smart move. I'm glad I did it.
Let's hear a little bit about what this does, okay? So I hope you can hear it because it's over there and the mic is here. So I'm just going to run through... I'll try not to talk too much. Run through the options on this guitar. Now, I'm going to go by position. We've got a 5-position switch here. So, in the first position, which is all the way back, we have our P90. That's not all we have, because if you pull up this switch, which is the volume control to push-pull pot, what we also have is the lipstick. So you've got the P90 and the lipstick running together. So in a regular sort of Tele setup, that would be like the middle position in a 3-way switch. It doesn't just stop there. If I pull this, it means that the lipstick has been flipped out of phase with this guy. So here is the P90 all on its own. It's fairly strong. It's a nice gritty kind of a sound. If I pull up the switch, I'm knocking the lipstick in parallel. A little bit, I don't know, is it chimey? Is that the word we use for the lipstick in the neck position? Don't know, don't really care. There's a little bit, it's a little softer, a little smoother, not as gritty, not as harsh. So that's those two running in parallel with each other. Now, if I pull up this one, which is at the tone end of things, really harsh sounding. Now, why is it harsh sounding? It's because they're running out of phase. This lipstick guy here is out of phase with the P90, and it does give you a really harsh setting. It's not something that you would necessarily strum with, but if you're going to be doing a little bit of soloing here and there, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, it's going to push the mids through, so you're going to stand out quite a bit. It's a little bit like having a treble booster. So that, in our single position there, number one position, we actually have 3 settings, 3 things that we can do. Now, the weird, cool thing is that with this setup, because these two can run in parallel, it means that position 1 all the way back and position 5 all the way forward can do exactly the same thing. It's because they're running in parallel. It means that they're both connected in either of those situations. So you've got 2 positions, and in those 2 positions you have 3 settings. So we're still knocking up the tone tracks. We're laying down the tone machine here, right? So a reset, and I'll go to position 2. Position 2 gives us our middle pickup and the P90. But it doesn't just stop there. No, of course it doesn't. So we have these 2 running. Now this little toggle switch here changes this guy from a single coil to a humbucker. So in our regular setup here, we have 2 single coils like you would expect from a Strat. Knock that up. You've got 3 coils running entirely. So so far that's 2 tone settings for this one position. And then what happens if I pull up this guy here? It means we've got this guy and this guy running in parallel. So now we have all 3 pickups going at once. So that's 3 combinations on this one setting. If I put it forward to 4 there, No, I'm not going to put it forward to 4 there. I'm going to just go into the middle. In the middle position, let's see, what you've got is your single pickup there in the middle. It's in single coil mode. And then when you flick the switch, you've got humbucker. Okay, so sounds a bit like a humbucker. Instantly you're going to notice a bit of a volume drop there, right? So let me go back to number 2 because I didn't actually demo any of that. So number 2 in a sort of a stock style, we've got the P90 and the middle one. It's good, not a bad little strummy kind of a sound. I'll knock that up, and now we've got 3 coils going. Much the same kind of a sound, a little bit stronger because we've got that extra coil here, you know, with the humbucker. And then when I pull this guy up, all 3 pickups are going at once. All 3 pickups, but you've got 4 coils. So now there. And that there's a little bit of a change in sound there. So I'm already losing count of the number of options that we have on this thing, right? So then we go to position 3, demoed that already. Position 4 is going to be very much like position 2 here. In fact, I think it's the same because we've got these 2 running, okay? So that's, well, it's not exactly the same. So we have only these 2 running. But then if I pull this guy up, we've got all 3 running. If I do this, we've got a total of 4 coils going because this guy's a humbucker. If I pull this guy is out of phase. So in that regard, position 2 and 4 are, I suppose they can be almost identical to each other, but still losing count, completely losing count of how many tone options we have. Now, if I go forward to number 5, we've already seen that number 5 is exactly the same as number 1, or it has the same number of options, which in this case is 3, right? Number 5, we've got just the lipstick pickup in the neck. If I pull this guy up, I've got the lipstick and the P90, and if I flip this guy, not flip it, if I pull this guy, then the lipstick is out of phase with the P90. I hope that you are exhausted as I am. Because that was... This is like a tone machine. This is like a magical cauldron of tone, right? What else can I say about this guitar? It's got 12s on it. 12 to 54. So it's not a big bendy machine. It's a good sort of a strummy, kind of attacky sound. The thing I like about big, thick strings on a scale of this length is you can still get a fairly low action without a huge amount of natural sort of a fret buzz, because even though it's a heavier string and it needs a sort of a wider space to breathe, it's tight, it's really tight because it's, you know, on this size of scale. And so they end up sounding quite nice. If I wanted to detune it, you know, drop tune to D or whatever, probably going to be just fine too. But I am digging this. I wouldn't play 12s myself because I do like a little bit of a string bend. I feel that this is... It's a bit of an effort. It's not too bad, but I think if you're used to 11s, you'll feel your fingers kind of, you know, maybe callousing up a little bit more, which is maybe not a bad thing, right? That's kind of it. So this has been a really lengthy. I'm glad that you've stayed to this length if you have, because some of that stuff can be quite boring and technical and all that, but it just kind of goes to show you, if you have the imagination, you can achieve so much with relatively little. You can go from a stock thing with, you know, maybe 5 tones on it to the, I don't know, I think it's at least 10 type of tonalities that we can get from this thing. So I hope you've enjoyed it. This thing was really fun to do. What could I do different? I don't really think there's a whole lot you could do different. You know, what you could do is instead of the 5-way switch, you could have individual switches for each pickup, individual phase options for each pickup, and you could still have your single and humbucker mode for the middle there. But we're talking insanity at this point, which is cool. Insanity works all right with guitars, but no, for now I think we've got quite enough going on with this guy. And with that, I will also leave you for now. And I thank you very much for watching this far. Oh, do you want to comment and like and subscribe and all that shit? Do you really care? Do I really care? Who cares?